Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. Today's guest is North Carolina writer Charlie Lovett. Lovett has written several books on the 19th century writer Lewis Carroll, as well as a series of novels which combine his expertise in antiquarian books with his storytelling powers. The Bookman's Tale was a recent bestseller. His newest is The Lost Book of the Grail. I spoke with Charlie Lovett at the Alabama Booksmith in Homewood, Alabama. Please join me. Mr. Lovett, it's a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I've enjoyed reading your books, but we have never had a chance to talk before.
No, this is the first time we've met.
Yeah, it is first-time guests. I usually ask a little bit of biographical background. I know you're a North Carolinian, and I know you're essentially a Winston-Salem person. Were you born there, raised there?
I was born and raised there. My father was on the faculty at Wake Forest University, taught English literature, so I come by my love of books genetically. I guess you would say he was also a book collector. And haven't spent my whole life in Winston-Salem, but an awful lot of it.
Yeah, you were at Davidson, right?
I went to Davidson for college, yeah, and I lived in Atlanta for a little while after college.
Did you ever serve in the Army?
No, I never did.
All the Davidson boys that I knew, they were all ROTC. It seemed like Davidson was pretty thick with that, and they would go on and serve there in peacetime. It was all my friends were.
Yeah, I certainly had friends who were in ROTC
right.
And who went on into the service.
Right, and if I'm not mistaken, you took an interest in the book business very, very early. I mean, I read you were something like 22 years old when you started buying and selling.
Yeah, I was. I think because I had grown up in a house with a book collector and had gotten interested in the idea of book collecting pretty early and started buying books for my own collection probably when I was in college. When I got out of college with this lovely liberal arts degree, what do? Well, there was a guy running an antiquarian bookstore, and I thought that sounds like a fun place to work. And so I worked for him for less than a year, and then went out on my own and established an antiquarian book business in Winston-Salem.
On your own means you drive around, find books, buy them,
yeah,
and then find someone to buy them from
and
you.
then find someone to buy them from you. It's almost that simple and that difficult, but it was fun. I liked the fact that it was sort of this constant treasure hunt. And 9 times out of 10, when somebody called you to their house or to the house of maybe a family member who'd passed away or something, you would go in and you'd have to find a polite way of telling them that these books really weren't worth very much. But you sort of lived for that 1 time out of 10 when you found something really special.
Did you work when you found something special in a estate sale or even in a small town bookstore, used bookstore? Must be terribly tempting to just very quietly buy it and take it away. But did you work on commission? Did you? What? I'm not suggesting anything unethical. I just, what do you do when you find it?
I think there was sort of a general understanding in those days when there were a lot of shops that tended to be sort of specialist shops. It was impossible for every dealer to know everything about every book.
Right.
And so we all knew that we had books in our shop that were underpriced. And you were almost happy if another dealer would find that book, or if you would find that book in someone else's shop, because then you knew it was going to be appreciated. It wasn't going to just be bought by somebody who was looking for a $3 book and thrown on the heap. It was going to be taken care of. So I think there was this kind of assumption among gentlemen, because it was mostly gentlemen in those days,
right.
That if you found a what we called a sleeper in somebody else's shop, bully for you. That was part of the business, and everybody was happy about it.
And of course, you started off with an interest in English literature, and then narrowed it so that I understand, as a collector, not as a book dealer, but as a collector, you were a Lewis Carroll expert.
Yeah, my collection is it began. My father was what we call a single title collector. He collected Robinson Crusoe, which is a cool book to collect because it's been in print constantly since 1719. So I started out with this idea of maybe collecting a single title, and I had enjoyed these audio recordings, these LP records of Alice in Wonderland that I listened to as a
Yeah.
child with Cyril Richard, reading the book. And so I thought, well, I'll collect Alice in Wonderland. I didn't know anything about Lewis Carroll. I didn't know anything about the Victorian period or Oxford or anything else. And gradually that collection has become what I would call sort of Lewis Carroll and his world. I have lots and lots of his other writings. He wrote tons of pamphlets and contributions to the press and things like that. And I also have books that he read. I have his typewriter. I have books that he owned and playbills from theater productions he went to see. So I'm trying to sort of put his life and his work in a broader context.
My understanding, correct me if this is wrong, but I don't understand that you've held a job as a teacher here or there, but I know you've lectured like crazy on Lewis Carroll here and in England and Canada.
I mean, I've given a lot of talks over the years at I think I did one at the Smithsonian one time and at various different universities, and a lot of times with various Lewis Carroll societies that are putting on conferences and things.
Sure.
And so it gives you a chance to pick one sort of very focused topic to spend 45 minutes on.
Yeah. Well, at some point you made a physical connection with England. I mean, you started visiting England and obviously have fallen in love with Oxfordshire.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time over there. I first spent time in England when I was in high school, and I was there on about a 2.5-month study program where we lived in this big old house in the countryside with this family and traveled around and studied Shakespeare and architecture. And at that point, I started to understand the difference between being a tourist and being a resident. And I always wanted to go back as a resident. And so in the late 90s, my wife and my daughter and I went and spent about 6 months living in this little village in Oxfordshire because I wanted to be close to Oxford where Lewis Carroll lived and worked. And we just fell in love with it. And we've since, many years later, we ended up buying the cottage that we had rented in the late 90s. So we spend about 5 or 6 weeks a year there and are know a lot of the people in the village and sort of have this community that we can be active in when we're residents, not tourists.
Yeah, you can go back to the same place if you can get deeper.
Yeah,
I found it when I, as a tourist, I like to visit a place maybe once or twice, but if I don't get a little bit further down into the local culture, it's as if, well, I've done this.
Exactly.
Then you need more.
Yeah.
You need human beings.
Yeah, and that's really we love the countryside there. We love the culture there, but what we love most there are our friends and the people that we get a chance to see and spend time with.
Well, if a person were graphing out your biography, you'd have an interest in books, an interest in England, an interest in English books and English history and the English countryside, and then you decided that you would begin a new career as a novelist. And so what happened?
So
all the streams come together.
One of these fine neighbors in England that I referred to actually when my first novel came out referred to me as the man who took 20 years to become an overnight success because I'd been trying to write long form fiction for a long time, and I'd gotten my MFA and I'd done all the things that you're supposed to do, and I'd gotten a nice big stack of rejection letters back in the day when they were letters and not emails, and but I think what made my first novel, The Bookman's Tale, work and what made it a success is sort of exactly what you hint at, that I, instead of trying to write a great novel, I just wrote a story that was about the things that I was passionate about, old books and the English countryside and English literature and Shakespeare and the things that excited me, and that excitement seemed to come through in the text and connect to the readers.
You have in the 3 novels that I know, you have, let's see, twice an American male and a British female, and once the other way around. Yeah. But in each case, the male, the boy, and they usually are just slightly more than boys, is the shyest fellow, quiet, very reserved in The Bookman's Tale, and of course he ends up grieving and shy. But then the young man in the new book,
Arthur Prescott. Yeah,
Arthur is a bookish, shy young man.
Yeah. I think. Well, to go to the first part of the comment about this sort of Americans and Brits working together. I think some of that comes from my own cross-cultural experience and observing in my own life, but also in the people around me, how we connect and sometimes fail to connect
Right.
as cultures that share a lot. We share a lot of heritage. We share a lot of language, not completely our language, but and yet there's great differences. And to me, that creates interesting tensions and interesting possibilities. The shyness, I do see them as very different characters, but yeah, I think sometimes my book protagonists have that introversion that you almost have to have that to be a novelist. I think if you've got to have those. It doesn't mean you have to be an introvert, but you have to have that ability to have moments of introversion, because what we have to do is sit in a room alone and think.
Whether you're introverted or not, you have to stay in a room by yourself a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that may be some of where that comes from. But again, I think it gives a character an opportunity for an interesting arc if they begin in a place where they have built walls around themselves, and then part of your story can be how those walls can be broken down.
Right. Usually the American, whether it's an American girl or as it is in the most recent novel,
Yeah.
or the American boy as it is in the First Impressions, and the American is more likely to be extroverted.
Yeah. And that's certainly the case in the new novel.
In the new novel,
and there's
right.
the first scene where Arthur first meets Bethany, this young American. Arthur is sort of obsessed with the world of old books and old manuscripts,
Yes.
and he likes to sort of live in the library at this cathedral where he spends a lot of his time. And I talk about Arthur as a person who is fascinated with information technology. He believes that information technology reached its zenith in about the year 1350, and has kind of been going steadily downhill ever since. But the first scene when he meets Bethany, she's just this breathless ball of energy who's talking about Instagram and eBay, and he's just has no idea what to make of her. But she really is sort of feels emotionally and in terms of energy like the opposite of Arthur, and yet they find out eventually that they have these points of connection.
She's there to digitize. And
Right.
The word,
his precious. He looks at these medieval manuscripts as sort of his own children almost.
Yeah.
And she's gonna come and reduce his children to these little computer files, and he does not like that idea very much.
There's a process there. The process begins with Arthur horrified. But in time he realizes this is a way of sharing. This is a way of making this stuff available to the whole world.
Yeah,
not just to the people who end up in that room.
They have their first conversation together is one in which he is sort of defending the whole idea of the printed book and the traditional library and the card catalog and all these things that he grew up with. And she is defending the idea of what you just said, sort of, digitizing things, putting them online, making them available to the broad world. Right. And I think even in the context of that one conversation, they each come to see part of the other's point of view and learn from each other. And Arthur does come to a point where he can appreciate digital media. And Bethany, who likes books more than Arthur realizes at first, also learns something about the beauty of the real thing, if you will. Yeah. And to me, that it reflects a little bit my own process in writing this book, because people have said, "Oh, I'm surprised that you say anything nice about digital media," but I don't think I could have written this book without the opportunity to go into real cathedral libraries and hold real medieval manuscripts in my hands and see what they looked like and felt like. But I also couldn't have written it without digital research sites, scanned manuscripts and rare books and various different things that I had access to that the average researcher wouldn't have had access to even 10 or 15 years ago.
No. Well, there are mysteries in the Grail book. And the mysteries can only be solved finally, oddly, paradoxically, by using the internet.
Yeah.
And Bethany knows.
But also by using these medieval manuscripts. So it takes, in the end, it takes both.
Right. Where are they, though? You have to find out where they are and get the clues. You say the sights and the sounds, and I've reading. You probably know this. Did you know that your novels are full of smells?
Yeah, that's a very conscious thing because
Yeah,
one of the things that I'm as a book lover,
Yeah.
I want to sort of remind people that the experience of a physical book is not limited to sight.
Yeah.
It is a multi-sensory experience,
Right.
and it's a tactile experience. It's
Right.
an olfactory experience.
Right.
And Arthur talks about how he says something like, "I can tell more from the way a book smells than you could ever tell from a
Yeah.
computer screen."
Yeah.
And it's true. I mean, he
Both the novels, in both of the Bookman's Tale and Grail novel, both those young men both love touching the books
Yeah.
and smelling them, and they enter a library. It's a perfume.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
them. Right.
And we read about the fact that the sense of smell is the one that's most closely linked to memory, and part of what all of these people in these novels are doing who are interacting with these old books is finding ways to connect to the past through the medium of a book.
Right.
Sometimes that's their own personal past. Sometimes it's a much deeper past. I mean, Arthur's trying to suss out a story that's 1,500 years old.
Yes. In the new book, there's a mystery.
There are a number of mysteries,
Right.
but yes.
There's a Saint Iwolda.
Yep.
Is that how you pronounce it?
That's how I pronounce it.
Yeah.
Since I more or less made up the name, I think we can pronounce it however you like.
And then there is the legend of the Grail, Joseph of Arimathea, perhaps the cup, and then the table. It's all about. How many historical moments are there in the Grail book? 10?
Well, there's the way the book is structured. Each chapter, Arthur's trying to discover the story of this founder of the cathedral,
Right.
and he believes that her story might somehow be connected to the legends of the Holy Grail. So there's sort of this double
And the King Arthur mythology
there's
as well.
this sort of double-layered mystery there.
Right.
And so while Arthur's trying to figure that out, and Bethany as well, at the beginning of each chapter, we go back and pick up a short little piece that is set in a historical period starting in the 6th century and moving forward as we follow how this story and these secrets were passed on from generation to generation throughout history. But I tended to pick moments, sort of critical moments in history, like the Viking invasions, which was something that a lot of books and monasteries were destroyed at that time, or the Reformation, when a lot of books disappeared out of cathedrals and monasteries. But in the same time, when I was writing those historical tidbits, I wanted to write not about kings and queens and leaders and military events, but about how all of those grand events of history played out just in the ordinary everyday lives of people in a small cathedral city.
Barchester.
Yeah.
Trollope's imaginary.
Yeah.
Now, not less imaginary now, Barchester.
So
and the cathedral.
I didn't want to set my book in a real cathedral city because I wanted to be the one to invent the deep history. But I thought by using Barchester, which was invented by Anthony Trollope in the 1850s for his novels, and has been used by other authors since, I thought that gave me a nice mix of a city that felt like it had some reality to it. It's sort of, people are like, oh yeah, I've heard that name, but I got to sort of invent almost all of the history.
I would bet if you could poll your readers with the new book, that a lot of them would think that Barchester was a real place with a real cathedral.
So I've been trying to catch people out on that when I've been on tour. There's a point in my presentation where I just look out and say, I'm curious, has anyone here been to Barchester? And every now and then a hand goes up. So,
Well, there are a lot of likes, the cathedral cities. You have a love story. The two are going to come to know one another and like one another. And you have the historical moment. This is trying to formulate a question about violence here.
Yeah.
What you did in the new book was put all the violence at the moments of great stress for Walda or her table or her magic spring or her chapel. In the Bookman's Tale, you bring the violence right up into the present tense. There's murder, bloodshed, mayhem.
Yeah.
In the new book, you put it not off stage, but well back into Henry VIII's violence, or Cromwell's violence, or the Vikings' violence. Did you make a decision about that?
Well,
something that struck me.
It's all about sort of stakes, I think, and so to me, the stakes in Arthur's story, in the main story of the book, were not going to be about personal safety but they're mistakes that in Arthur's mind are actually much grander stakes, because they're first of all about the future of the cathedral itself. There's a question about problems with the structure and not having enough money to repair the cathedral, and the whole thing could come tumbling down. The future of this library, and these are things that to Arthur, what's important to him about the cathedral building, about the library, is that he talks about their history as being like the movement of the planets. This is a huge scope of history that goes back more than a millennium, and to him the protection and the continuation of that is much more important than the safety of any one individual person. And so it just creates a different kind of stakes than, is this man going to stab me, or is this man going to shoot me? I mean, it may not be bloodshed and personal violence, but to Arthur, they're extraordinarily high stakes.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, it's very important business to the people to whom it is very important business. Yeah. The Guardian. I like that stretch from the time of the Vikings and the Venerable Bede to the present. One Guardian. You describe it. The Guardian.
Well,
is
so there's a secret, without giving away too much to people who haven't read the book yet. There is a secret that has been kept over the centuries, and there is a corresponding treasure that is an artifact of some importance that has been kept over the centuries. But for various reasons, it's been decided early on that the best way to keep this safe is for not very many people to know about it. And eventually only one person to know about it. And so this idea of the mantle of the guardianship of this secret and this treasure is passed down from century to century, all the way to the present day. And to me, that echoes a lot of things. It echoes, in the Christian church, the whole idea of apostolic succession. So you've got this notion that there's a direct link to the past, but especially it connects to this idea of Arthur's that, at the beginning of the book, Arthur almost lives more in the past than he does in the present. He sees the world also as a museum, really. He sees it as a place to store beautiful old books and secrets from the deep, dark past and beautiful pieces of medieval architecture. And there's this interesting moment, to me it's interesting, when he first meets Bethany. It says that when he first saw her, he thought she was a statue, because he looks in and she's not moving. She's standing in the chapter house in the light of the afternoon sun, and he thinks it's an art show or something. And then she moves and she turns. And that's kind of symbolic of the whole relationship. He sees the world as a place that's sort of filled with statues, and Bethany's the one who teaches him that the world is actually a living place. So that that moment when she turns and becomes alive is sort of a key moment.
Yeah, they are immensely complementary, aren't they, those two?
Yeah, although sometimes they don't realize it.
No, I think, that's the course of true love and so on. If it's too smooth, it won't make a whole novel.
Right.
Your work for the last 20 years has been writing about Lewis Carroll and his books, writing your own books, writing plays, and now the future. What will come next?
The thing I'm working on right now is almost this combination of writing novels about old books and mysteries for adults, and the fact that I, as you alluded to, wrote these plays for children for many, many years. So I've actually just finished a middle grades book. So I'm writing for children again, but it's a book about some kids who find an old magical library full of interesting books. So that's sitting on the desk at Penguin Books right now. We're waiting to see if they like it. Hopefully they will enjoy that. And then the next adult novel I've just started to work on, and that unusually for me will be set largely in New York City in the early 20th century. So it's been a different kind of research for me, because if you research what's it like to be in a medieval cathedral, well, you can just go sit in one.
Right.
But to research what was New York City like in 1904, 1905, 1906, that's not really there anymore. There's little bits and pieces of it, but you can't really go stand in the middle of that. So it's been a fun challenge for me. But it'll still be very much connected to the world of books and writing and publishing and collecting and all those aspects of the book world that I love so much.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You can go 1,000 years back and still have the cathedral to sit in.
Yeah.
But you can only, if you go 100 years back, it's likely not to be there
Yeah.
anymore. Well, you're off with the new book. I presume you're traveling about right now on your way.
Yeah, I was in Atlanta this morning. I had an event there last night, and then I'll be back up in North Carolina later on this week to do some more events up there. So it's been a fun tour. Because this is my third novel now, I'm starting to have people come to my tour events who actually are familiar with my work. I'm not a stranger to them anymore. And once you've been on the road for a couple of weeks, then you start having people who've actually read this novel and want to talk about it, and you have to kind of go, shh, don't give anything away.
Well, it's a mystery. It's a love story. It's historical. It's a mystery. It's fun. I think people will enjoy it.
I hope so. I had fun writing it and researching it and being in that world for that time, and I hope readers will too.
Good to see you. I hope I see you again.
I hope so.